Dr. Qianqian, also known as Lydia Cheng, received her master's degree from Xiamen University in China. Her interest in Loren Eiseley led her to seek a PhD at the Université Toulouse Jaurès in France under the direction of Professor Wendy Harding, who is a French eco-critic. She successfully received her PhD in 2017 with the dissertation titled Bridging Divisions in Loren Eiseley's Writing on Science and Nature. This dissertation focuses on Eiseley's prose and poetry to show how he challenges the views of science, nature, and humans held by most of his contemporaries, in particular in arguing against scientific specialization and urging the importance of including the humanities in conversations about science. As part of her research for this project, Dr. Cheng visited Eiseley's hometown, Lincoln, Nebraska, where I'm located, in the summer of 2014, when many of us had an opportunity to meet with her. After receiving her PhD, Dr. Cheng worked for several years at the University of Shanghai for science and technology, and now teaches Chinese language and culture at the University of Toulouse, Jaurès in France. So, Dr. Cheng?
Thank you, Professor Lynch. So you can see my PowerPoint. Okay. My talk is Animals in Need, the Ecological Implication in Eiseley's Thoughts. Well, we all know Eiseley is interested in humans. You hear me well? Right. Okay. Eiseley's main concern is about humans and humanity, the nature of man, the mind of man. His meditation on humans focus on the bonds of humans and animals, the mystery of the ways those evolved over time, and how memories come into being. We'll have to look at the first one, the bonds between humans and the non-humans. Pondering the change in our understanding of the world made possible by evolutionary science, Eiseley makes a plea for an attitude of wonder in regard of the way the way life constitutes itself out of chemical constituents in a pile of dust. He asks, how natural was man, we may ask, until he come? What forces dedicated that a working egg should watch the red shift of light beyond the island universes, or listen by carefully devised antennae to the pulse of unseen stars, who rhythmically conceived that the plot of the world should begin in a mother or father at the end, where and with whom. Men argue earnestly over whether life is chemical chance or anti-chance, but they seem to forget that life in chemical may be the greatest chance of all, the most mysterious and unexplainable property in matter. This passage envelopes a sweep of time from even before Homo sapiens' distant ancestral origins to the modern astronomer with his sophisticated tools for exploring the universe. For Eiseley to explain life only in terms of its chemical or biological components is not enough, because life contains mysteries. Indeed, life in chemical, that is, capacity of the animate to become animate, is itself a miracle. He relates an anecdote from which he draws an exceptional perception, the countless components that build up the human body. In Eiseley's eyes, those components are not odd objects under the microscope, but tiny creatures that sacrifice, contribute, lovely make function their destiny, their creation, the human body. This insight occurs to him in the most banal of ways. He says, I caught the toe on my shoe in an ill-placed train and fell down, and the blood from a gash from my forehead was cascading over my face. Surprisingly, he is concerned less for himself than for the blood that spills out of him. He said, "Oh, don't go, I'm sorry I've done for you. I was addressing blood cells, phagocytoses, platicus, all the crawling, living, independent wonder that has been part of me, and now, through my folly and lack of care, were dying like a pitied fish on the hot pavement." In telling this anecdote, Eiseley defends his new idea about human nature against the 19th century evolutionists, and many philosophers till today are obsessed by struggle. They try to define natural selection in one sense only, as a struggle for existence on the part of individuals and their species, including man. Giving the example of the small parts, as we said, the tiny creatures that compose the body and the unknowingly sacrifice and work together for the organism which the parts cannot see. Eiseley presents the human body as an example of anti-struggle theory. He tries to make readers escape from the narrow explanation of life provided by struggle theory. This anecdote, the perception of Eiseley as nailing, trying to make readers escape from the narrow explanation of life provided by the struggle theory. He wants to propose a more corporate model in this case. The other meaning of this incident can be extended to the bond between humans and non-humans, because materials that form the human body make up non-humans too. The reminder that the humans are made up of other non-humans make us aware that we share of life elements and we are dependent on others for existence. This recalls what Dr. Jaurès says. I love the fact that human genomes can be found in only 10% of all the cells that occupy the mutant space I call my body. The other 90% of the cell are filled with the genomes of bacterial refugee processed and such, some of which play in a symphony necessary to my being alive at all, and some of which are hinting right and doing the rest of me of us no harm. I become an adult human being in company with those tiny mass nets. To be one is always to become is many. We can notice that both Harvey and Eiseley, they use the lovely words like tiny creature, tiny mass net to describe the organism that made up both human body and that of non-humans. Harvey brings up the notion of company species, and it meets his inspiration. I am instructed by the development biologist called Jaurès, critic of autophysis, with emphasis on self-building and self-maintaining system, closed except for nourishing flows of matter and energy. Jaurès stresses that nothing makes itself in the biological world, but rather than reciprocal induction within and between always in process creators, ramifies through space and time on both large and small scales in cascade of inter and interaction. In embryology, Jaurès calls this interspecies antigenist. Wendy Harding comments on Harvey's term company species that it takes all the organisms, macro and micro, that share our lives and make up our body. Elaborating on his notion of company species, Harvey explained that he finds it to be less a category than a pointer to an ongoing becoming race, to be much rich web to inhabit than any of the post-humans on display after or in reference to the ever different domain of man. A man's body and life is so mixed with other organisms that he's actually become those company species. We can have observation of one of Eiseley's animal poem, the old ones. I don't know if you can see it clearly. It's quite small. At the beginning, he says, well, he thought that he thinks that the God in the minds of man in the time of past, the old gods, Amasites, new girls, tricksters in all culture, laughing at man as themselves, licking the penis too and became a snake. Professor Lynch says that Eiseley finds the human animal mosaic gods more appropriate because as evolutionary teachings and as the DNA studies have things confirmed, we are in fact complex mosaics of all that have come before us. In affirming the idea that the human body contains various other life forms existing in the biosphere, I think Eiseley somehow anticipates Howard's notion of company species that man live with and become with. We can look at some lines. He claims that he has animals in him. I have found animals in me when I stroll in the forest. I hesitated before a large dragonfly. I stepped like a cat. In the night, I have felt something lifting along my neck when a wolf howls. This is a very ordinary landscape, but I feel in my body the lost muscle. My thoughts are become animals. Professor Lynch reveals that such passages illustrate how our instinct tie us back to our animal kin, revealing our mosaic status. And it further implies that many poetic metaphors we employ, I step like a cat in the night, are perhaps not just flights of fancy, but intimations of our evolutionary past that serve to write us back to the animal realm. Here, Professor Lynch insists on the scientific foundation of the becoming animal or in Eiseley's writing. So how Eiseley tastes out his becoming animal. Well, there is a way for him. He writes in the place of other animals. In other words, he becomes the voice of many things. He once wrote, I'm powerfully influenced by local and being geological trained, a local which may be project vertically in time. My mind is stuffed with treaties, mammal stones, and the lost trace of Indians and pioneers. I write because those things haunt me, and because in that sense, I'm the voice of things other than myself. This note refers to the remnants of the past that Eiseley, the anthropologist, recovers and interprets. But it can also just as easily transposed to Eiseley, the naturalist. Eiseley writing for animals, his being the voice of things other than himself, is not anthropomorphism, but a becoming animal. His mind is stuffed with other life forms.